Right now, American tech giants are losing $48 billion a year because of one country's digital wall. And they're about to break it. That country is India. And the wall is a set of rules so strict that Amazon and Walmart spent $20 billion trying to crack it, and still can't sell directly to Indian customers. The US government just escalated this from a business dispute to a full-blown trade war. And what happens next could reshape how you shop online, no matter where you live. Let me show you what's really going on. But before we dive in, if you're new here, hit the subscribe button and leave a comment. I subscribe. And I'll personally welcome you into the family. With that said, let's get started. Meet Raj. He's 34, lives in Delhi, and in 2018, he did what millions of small business owners did during the pandemic. He took his bookstore online. When he listed his books, he didn't choose Amazon. He went with Flipkart, an Indian platform that gave him something Amazon couldn't. 0% commission for 6 months, customer support in Hindi, and a cash-on-delivery system that actually worked in Tier 2 Indian cities where credit cards are rare. Raj made 180,000 rupees in his first 3 months. That's about $2,200. For a small bookstore owner in Delhi, that was life-changing money. He hired his nephew to help with packaging. His wife started handling customer calls. They were building something. But Raj isn't just one guy. He represents 140 million micro, small, and medium enterprises in India. These businesses employ 40% of India's workforce. That's 200 million people whose livelihoods depend on staying competitive. And India designed its e-commerce rules specifically to protect people like him. Here's the rule causing all the chaos. Foreign companies cannot hold inventory or control pricing on their Indian platforms. Think about that for a second. Amazon can operate in India, but they can't stock their own warehouses and sell to you directly like they do in America or Europe. They can only act as a middleman, connecting buyers to independent sellers. It's like telling McDonald's they can build restaurants in your country, but they can't make the burgers themselves. They can only let other people use their kitchen and take a cut. According to a 2023 Brookings Institution study, these restrictions cost US firms $12 billion annually in lost direct sales. And when you add in the opportunity cost of India's exploding market, that number jumps to $48 billion. India's e-commerce market is projected to hit $350 billion by 2030. That's larger than the entire economy of Denmark. And American companies are locked out of directly competing for it. Jeff Bezos visited India in 2020 and announced a $1 billion investment to digitize small businesses. He met with Prime Minister Modi. He posed for photos at Gandhi's memorial. He promised to create jobs. The Indian government smiled for the cameras and then tightened the regulations even further. But Amazon didn't just accept the rules. They found a workaround. And what they did next made them billions while destroying businesses like Raj's. They created something called preferred sellers. These were technically independent companies, but actually controlled by Amazon through joint ventures. 2 companies dominated this system, Cloudtail and Aperio. At their peak, they represented 40% of all sales on Amazon India. Billions of dollars in transactions were flowing through sellers that Amazon secretly controlled. Here's how it worked. Amazon would identify high-demand products. They'd source them directly from manufacturers at bulk prices. Then they'd route those products through Cloudtail and Aperio, who would list them on Amazon's platform. Because these sellers had Amazon's backing, they got special treatment, better search rankings, priority in discount campaigns, faster delivery through Amazon's logistics network, access to customer data that independent sellers never saw. So Amazon was technically following the law while completely violating its spirit. And sellers like Raj started noticing something was wrong. By 2020, when he searched for his own books on Amazon India, they were buried on page 8 of search results. Meanwhile, Preferred sellers dominated page 1 with identical books at prices 15% lower than his. He couldn't understand it. He had good reviews, his prices were competitive, his shipping was reliable. But the algorithm had turned against him. In October 2020, Raj sold 23 books the entire month. The year before, he'd sold over 300. His revenue dropped 60% in 11 months. His wife asked him to shut down the online store. His kids' school fees were late. He stopped sleeping. And he couldn't figure out what he'd done wrong. Then Reuters published their investigation in August 2021, and everything made sense. Internal Amazon documents showed executives writing things like, "We're treating some sellers as part of our business." They had secret pricing strategies, preferential search rankings, and data advantages that independent sellers never had access to. One document revealed that Amazon gave Cloudtail advance notice of upcoming discount campaigns, so they could stock up on inventory before competitors knew what was happening. Another showed that Amazon's algorithm was programmed to boost Cloudtail listings even when independent sellers had better prices or reviews. The Indian government responded fast. In 2022, they forced Amazon to shut down Cloudtail entirely. They launched investigations into predatory pricing. They threatened massive fines. Amazon's workaround was dead. But here's where the story takes a darker turn. Because Amazon wasn't the only company playing this game, and shutting down Cloudtail didn't solve the problem. Walmart had entered India by buying Flipkart for $16 billion in 2018. It was the largest e-commerce acquisition in history, and Walmart thought they'd cracked the code to India's market. But they ran into the same regulatory walls. They couldn't hold inventory. They couldn't control pricing. And unlike Amazon, they didn't have a decade of workarounds already built into the system. By 2023, Flipkart was losing market share. Amazon India was restructuring. And both American giants realized something terrifying. They'd spent a combined $36 billion entering India, and they were further from dominating the market than when they started. That's when the U.S. government got involved. And the pressure campaign they launched would shock the world. In 2023, the U.S. Trade Representative added India to the priority watch list for e-commerce barriers. That might sound bureaucratic, but it's the trade equivalent of being put on notice before sanctions. February 2024. Bilateral trade talks in Washington. U.S. officials demanded India remove FDI restrictions on e-commerce. They called the rules protectionist, anti-competitive, and a violation of free trade principles. India said no. Not politely. Not with diplomatic hedging. Just no. The U.S. delegation was stunned. India is supposed to be America's strategic partner in Asia. The counterbalance to China. The world's largest democracy aligning with American interests. But on e-commerce, India wouldn't budge an inch. June 2024. A leaked memo revealed the US was considering tariffs on Indian pharmaceuticals. That's a $25 billion export market. Indian generic drugs keep American healthcare costs manageable. Tariffs would hurt millions of American patients. But the threat was real. Let me introduce you to someone on the other side of this fight. Sarah Chen. She's 41, an American trade negotiator based in Washington, and she lost her family's electronics business to Chinese competition back in 2015. Her father had run a small electronics import company in San Francisco for 30 years. They employed 14 people. Then Chinese direct-to-consumer platforms flooded the market with identical products at 40% lower prices. Within 2 years, they were bankrupt. Her father never recovered emotionally. He died in 2019, and Sarah believes the stress of losing his life's work contributed to his heart attack. Now she fights for American companies trying to compete overseas. And she sees India's e-commerce rules as fundamentally unfair. She told me, if India wants access to our consumers, and they do, because the US is their largest export market, they need to give our companies fair access too. It's not about Amazon. It's about reciprocity. It's about American workers who deserve the same opportunities Indian companies get when they sell here. And she has a point. Indian companies operate freely in America. They hire workers, open offices, compete for contracts, all without special restrictions. Meanwhile, American e-commerce companies are handcuffed in India. A 2024 Peterson Institute analysis found that removing e-commerce barriers could increase U.S. digital exports by 34%. That's tens of thousands of jobs. That's economic growth. That's leverage in a global economy where America's dominance is slipping. The U.S. trade deficit with China hit $279 billion in 2023. American manufacturing has been hollowed out. And now India, a supposed ally, is blocking one of the few sectors where America still leads. From Sarah's perspective, this isn't protectionism, it's survival. But here's what Sarah and most American negotiators didn't expect. India's response would shock even seasoned diplomats. Instead of compromising, India introduced new rules in 2024 that made everything harder. Flash sales were banned. Deep discounting was restricted. Seller exclusivity arrangements were prohibited. And foreign e-commerce companies were required to report detailed transaction data to the Indian government monthly. The message was clear. We're not backing down. We're doubling down. American executives were furious. Lobbyists flooded Capitol Hill demanding action. And the question everyone kept asking was, why would India risk a trade war with its largest export partner? The answer goes back 400 years. In 1600, the British East India Company arrived in India as traders. They promised economic growth, access to global markets, fair partnerships. They said they just wanted to do business. The Mughal emperors welcomed them. Indian merchants traded with them. And for decades it seemed like a mutually beneficial relationship. Then slowly, the company started demanding special privileges. Trade monopolies, tax exemptions, the right to maintain private armies for security. By 1757, the East India Company had its own military that defeated the Nawab of Bengal at the Battle of Plassey. By 1858, they controlled the entire Indian subcontinent. What started as commerce ended in colonization. 200 years of exploitation followed. Famines killed tens of millions. India's share of global GDP dropped from 23% to under 4%. When India finally won independence in 1947, the trauma of that history was seared into the national consciousness. Indians call it the trader-to-ruler pipeline, and they're terrified of repeating it with modern corporations. But there's also hard economic data behind the fear, not just historical trauma. A 2023 study from the Indian Institute of Management modeled what would happen if India removed all e-commerce restrictions. Their findings were stark. Within 5 years, Amazon and Walmart would control 72% of India's online retail market. Within 10 years, 7.2 million small retailer jobs would be eliminated. Entire categories of local businesses would vanish. That's not speculation. That's what happened to Main Street America when Walmart arrived in the 1980s and 90s. Small towns lost their hardware stores, their bookshops, their clothing boutiques. Walmart paid lower wages than the businesses it replaced. Profits flowed to Bentonville, Arkansas, not back into local communities. That's what happened to European bookstores when Amazon entered. France lost 500 independent bookstores between 2010 and 2020. The UK lost over 1,000. India watched it all happen. They studied it. And they said, not here. Not to our people. And for Raj, the small bookstore owner I told you about earlier, the government gave him a lifeline. In 2023, they onboarded him to something called ONDC, the Open Network for Digital Commerce. It's India's government-backed alternative to Amazon, designed as a level playing field where no one gets algorithmic preference. Think of it like email. You can use Gmail, Yahoo, Outlook, whatever you want. But they all connect to the same network. You're not locked into one company's ecosystem. ONDC works the same way. Sellers list on one platform, but buyers can find them from any app. No single company controls the marketplace. No algorithm picks winners and losers. Raj's books are now discoverable across 15 different shopping apps. His revenue is recovering at 15% monthly growth. His kids are back in school. His wife stopped asking him to quit. He told me, "I don't hate Amazon. I just want a fair fight. If they want to compete in India, compete fairly. Don't use algorithms and data advantages to bury me." So looking at both sides, you'd think this is a simple story of American corporations versus Indian small businesses. Free market capitalism versus economic protectionism. But there's a twist that changes everything. Because while the US and India fight, there's a third player quietly dominating: China. While American and Indian negotiators argue about inventory rules and FDI restrictions, Chinese e-commerce platforms like Shein and Temu are using a direct-to-consumer model that bypasses Indian regulations entirely. They don't set up shop in India. They don't register as Indian companies. They don't hire Indian workers or pay Indian taxes. They ship directly from China to Indian customers. And legally, they're just exports, not e-commerce operations, subject to FDI rules. 2024 data shows Chinese platforms now control 18% of Indian online fashion sales. That's up from 3% in 2021. And they're subject to exactly zero of the regulations that hamstring Amazon and Walmart. The irony is almost painful. India's rules were designed to protect local businesses from foreign e-commerce giants. But those rules don't touch the Chinese platforms that are actually taking market share. And here's the kicker. Amazon can't compete with Chinese prices, even if India opens the market completely. Shein sells a dress for $8. The same quality dress costs Amazon $15 to source, stock, and ship. How is that possible? Chinese manufacturers receive massive government subsidies. Their logistics infrastructure took 30 years and trillions in state investment to build. Their labor costs are still lower despite rising wages. And they've perfected ultra-fast fashion supply chains that can go from design to delivery in 2 weeks. A 2024 Harvard Business Review study found that the U.S. India e-commerce dispute created a strategic opening for Chinese ultra-fast fashion platforms worth $8 billion. In other words, while America and India fight each other, China is winning. Even Sarah, the American trade negotiator I told you about, admitted this to me. She said, "We're fighting the wrong battle. The real threat isn't each other, it's China." But our governments are too proud to admit it. And that realization is starting to change everything. Behind closed doors, the tone of U.S.-India trade talks is shifting. The angry demands are being replaced by quiet problem-solving. And a new proposal is emerging. What if, instead of fighting each other, the US and India teamed up against China? India would ease restrictions for trusted partners like the US and Europe. American companies would get more access, not unlimited access, but meaningful access. In exchange, both countries would work together to restrict Chinese e-commerce platforms. Tariffs on direct shipments, stricter customs enforcement, requirements that any platform serving Indian customers must have Indian operations and pay Indian taxes. It's economic nationalism, but aimed at the right target. Preliminary discussions happened in September 2024. Both sides were cautiously optimistic, but nothing was finalized. And then something leaked. October 2024. A draft framework appeared on a Georgetown University researcher's blog. No one knows who leaked it. Both governments denied it was official. But the document laid out a detailed compromise proposal. And if it's real, it could change everything. Point 1. US companies can hold up to 49% inventory on their Indian platforms. Not full control like they have in America. Not zero like the current rules. But 49%. A minority stake that gives them supply chain efficiency without market dominance. Point 2. Indian small sellers get protected category status on all platforms. Guaranteed visibility. No algorithmic burial. If you search for books, you must see results from small sellers and large sellers mixed together. Point 3. Joint anti-predatory pricing enforcement. Both countries work together to identify when anyone, American, Indian, or Chinese, is selling below cost to destroy competition. And they shut it down together. Point 4. Data localization. All servers handling Indian customer data must be physically located in India. This addresses India's national security concerns about data flowing overseas. Point 5. A joint innovation fund. The US and India would each contribute $500 million annually to help small Indian sellers adopt better technology, logistics, and digital marketing. Why might this actually work? Because Amazon gets partial control. They can stock fast-moving items, manage supply chains efficiently, and compete on price. It's not everything they want, but it's better than nothing. Raj-type sellers get guaranteed visibility. They're not drowned out by algorithms designed to favor big players. They get protection without isolation. India keeps regulatory sovereignty. No foreign company can dominate. The government retains the power to enforce rules and protect its people. And both countries can jointly target Chinese platforms that are playing by nobody's rules. A 2024 Wharton School analysis of hybrid e-commerce models found they showed 23% better small business retention rates compared to fully open markets. When I asked Raj about this potential compromise, he said, "If Amazon plays fair, there's room for all of us. If they don't, I have ONDC. But I'd rather have both options than be stuck with just one." But there's a catch. Actually, several catches. This framework requires approval from both Indian Parliament and the US Congress. India has elections coming up. E-commerce is a politically sensitive issue. Any politician seen as selling out to American corporations could lose votes. In the US, tech regulation is a partisan nightmare. Progressives want to break up Amazon. Conservatives want free market access to India. Getting both sides to agree on a nuanced compromise is nearly impossible. Then there's the lobbying. Amazon has spent $18 million on lobbying in the US in 2024 alone. Indian small business associations have massive political influence. Both sides will fight any compromise that doesn't give them everything. And if no deal happens by mid-2025, this trade spat could escalate to broader tariffs affecting $190 billion in annual US-India trade. That's not just e-commerce. That's tech services, pharmaceuticals, defense equipment, education. Everything goes on the table. India is America's fastest-growing major export market. The US is India's largest trading partner. A full trade war would devastate both sides. But here's what really keeps me up at night. This fight isn't just about India and Amazon anymore. The European Union is already drafting similar e-commerce rules. They're calling it the Digital Markets Act, and it's designed to prevent any single platform from dominating. Southeast Asian nations are watching India's experiment closely. Vietnam, Indonesia, and Thailand are all considering copycat regulations. Even US states are proposing anti-monopoly e-commerce laws. New York, California, and Texas have bills in committee right now. India isn't an outlier. India is the test case. What happens here will determine how e-commerce regulation unfolds globally for the next 20 years. So here's what I need to know from you. Should small businesses be protected even if it means you pay higher prices? Or should we let the free market decide, even if it destroys local economies? Because what's happening in India right now is coming to your country next. The question is whether we'll learn from India's approach or repeat America's mistakes. Drop your country flag in the comments and tell me, would you support these rules where you live? Would you pay 10% more if it meant your neighbor's business survived? And here's the thing nobody's talking about. This isn't really about trade policy or regulations. It's about what kind of world we want to live in. Do we want a world where 3 companies control all commerce and every transaction flows through their servers? Or do we want a world where millions of small businesses can compete, innovate, and build wealth in their communities? Do we want efficiency and low prices above everything else? Or do we want resilience, diversity, and local control even if it costs a bit more? There's no right answer. But we have to choose. And that choice is happening right now in negotiations between the US and India that most people don't even know are taking place. If you want to see how China is actually winning the global e-commerce war while everyone's distracted, that video's coming next. What I found will change how you see every online order you make.